Hello, everyone out there. Welcome to Panoramic Perspectives, and we are Panorama Paranormal. My name is Carl Johnson, and this is Elise Gianmarco Carlson. Yes.
Sounds exactly like it's spelled.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know. People do have trouble with it. I don't know why. It's got the two M's that throws them off.
Our show is Panoramic Perspectives. You probably know that if you're tuning in. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Dead Air Full Spectrum so that you can catch the show and all the other wonderful shows that are on this channel.
Yes, and if you absolutely couldn't watch tonight's episode, you'll be able to see it on YouTube, and our sites, our pages. So, yes, we are already halfway through 2023, and that's kind of scary when you think about it.
I mean,
we're approaching the.
As you get older, it does go fast, don't it?
It does. There's some phenomena about that. It's like the Mandela effect along those principles, and it's the psychological impact and
the Doppler effect.
Yeah, it's like, where did it go? Where was that year? Yeah, I like that. You think fast. Wow. So what do we really have coming up? We're going to devise a few things,
Well, of course, we've got Ocean State Paranormal.
That's what I'm really looking forward to. And towards the end of September, September 28th, 29th, and 30th, I will be in New Orleans for for Fear Fest, and my friend Howard Petrie just had an episode where he had something. Actually, he had a blood clot go through his brain, but did not lodge there. So he's fortunate in that way. But it was one of his many close calls.
Well,
but he's. I said, now you're going to be up for. He's fine. He's grilling outside, and this was just like 2 days ago. He said, "Oh yeah, if I'm dead, it's still going on." I said, "Well, that's very encouraging, Howard.
He'd be there in spirit."
Yes.
But we'd rather have you there in person.
Yeah, I think actually, 29th, 30th, and 1st. That's what the dates are. And Ocean State Paracon is going on the 9th and 10th of September, which will be here before we know it.
Let's not rush it. Yeah, it'll be here soon enough.
Yeah.
There's the lineup. All the faces you know and love.
I love them all. Yeah. Some more than others.
All friends of ours.
Yeah. So what have you got coming up, Elise?
I really don't have anything coming up.
Don't you?
You know what, though? I've had things come up from the past, though, today. I uploaded a picture of something that we were involved with 2 years ago this week. Do you recognize that lighthouse?
That's right, this week. Oh, my God.
It was 2 years ago this week that we recorded an episode of A Haunting.
A Haunting.
And that was during COVID, and that was a weird experience.
Yeah, it was like you go into the studio, I'll come out, I'll go into the studio, I'll be interviewed, you'll be interviewed, but we
sat in the bedroom for 3 hours with no internet.
Yeah, we just stayed mentally active. Yeah, we were filming for A Haunting, the episode called Inner Demons, and it documented a case, a Panorama Paranormal case that we were on.
Actually, you can catch that once in a while. It was season 11, episode number 4, in A Haunting, which actually, season 11 just won a Silver Award.
Yes, it did.
Excellence in some TV land awards that they give out.
The actor who portrayed me was telling me about that. Yeah, because he was there for the award ceremony.
Yeah, we heard it from one of the producers too.
Yeah, we did have actors.
This has a description of inner demons, childhood sweethearts reconnect, but they're happily ever after is threatened by dangerous poltergeist
you got it right there. Yeah.
In their new home. Would you think I memorized this? When they find cryptic messages written on the bathroom mirror, the frightened couple reaches out to a renowned demonologist. That's you.
Yes. And actually, it is rated #1 out of the 11 seasons, #1 most viewers and most response. I think that is because it's not just all about the ghosties. It is haunted, but it has a psychological twist to it.
Yeah, and we're still friendly with those people, with the clients.
And it's very accurate as they go. Very accurate.
Yeah, very nice people. It was, that was it escalated quickly. Let's put it that way. I remember I told the head, just went for an interview.
The casting producer, I said, you have to have someone pretty play Elise, or it's just not going to be real life. It's not going to be realistic.
So they got a tall, thin redhead.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, well, they filled my order.
Hey.
Yeah, you were a tall, thin redhead.
Yeah, I looked real good that day. Let me tell you.
And they said, and Carl, here's who is playing you. And I went, okay, no complaints. Right? No, but he told me that John Castle. He said that you're. I asked him, did you get hired because we look alike? Because I see the resemblance. He said, actually, yeah, I had to audition anyway, but that's why they cast me. So
you are the renowned demonologist that they reached out to, and then subsequently featured
world
on the
renowned,
show.
Mind you. They always say
you are not the only demonologist in the world, are you?
No, there is another one, but that means they know me in Lois Lobovia, But Yeah, there is another demonologist. In fact, it's very rare when we have another demonologist on the show.
Yes.
And demonologists aren't that common anyway. But this person is multifaceted, as a matter of fact. And that's a good lead in for her. She is Alex Marie Gaska, and she has her own website. She's going to tell you about what she does and how she started in this, and really, truly multifaceted. So let's bring her on. She's still with us. Oh,
Hi.
hi, Alex.
Hi,
You
how
look
are
so
you?
nice. Hi, you look relaxed and happy.
Yes, in my happy place. Thank you for having me on, you guys.
This is what you came for, lightning. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that was good.
Oh, I didn't. We were talking too much for me to do a whole song, but you might hear me later. Yeah. You have a bright light shining over your head. Is it artificial or is that your aura? You are like
Oh,
glowing.
I think that's the
It's not
lamp.
a problem. It's not a problem. It makes you look holy. So,
Right.
yeah.
With the holy part of what I do, and then the
Mhm. What you do is amazing because we try to categorize, and we only have limited nomenclature. Like we call you a psychic because you intuit, you receive impressions, you have information that most people wouldn't normally have access to. It comes to you. I think everybody has this ability to a degree, but yours is heightened. Yours you actually put to use, and you are an artist too. We'll get into that. Heavens to Murgatroyd. And you even are a little witchy.
a little
Uh,
bit, yeah. I practice herbalism and I do cord cuttings to basically cut trauma, because sometimes we can have attachments that come from our childhood trauma. So I like to do witchy stuff with that for healings and healing purposes, protections, stuff like that.
And you have another interest, actually kind of a calling, which really fascinates me. You are also a demonologist.
Yes,
I
yes, I
think I've
am.
met a demonologist of the female persuasion. So this is all interesting. And you combine all these disciplines, interrelated disciplines, that they all work, they come together for you.
Yeah, I really haven't seen anybody else do it. And I was like, I feel like they almost go hand in hand, because a lot of times you need to call the psychic onto the scene. And um, truly, I didn't even realize I was studying it from a young age. And then when it all came together, I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Was there any one time when you did start? Can you remember, or was it always like an interest to you and you kind of grew into it, or did something more definite, maybe even traumatic, happen to you?
A little bit more traumatic, even, actually. I grew up in a house that was infested and had a failed exorcism.
A
Um,
failed exorcism.
Yes, yeah. And that was while I was realizing I was a psychic medium. So I ended up being a main target for one of the entities that was coming through a portal, actually.
Oh,
So,
yeah,
it,
baptism by fire, in a sense.
yeah, almost really, though. It was just wild. So I kind of feel like the universe prepared me for this, because after a lot of experiences in my parents' house, I didn't want to talk to spirits, let alone people, about it, and something called me back. I had actually one mentor before the one that certified me, Chrissy London. She's worked with like Tim Shaw a bit and everything. She used to tell me, she's like, "You're gonna be an exorcist one day," and I was like, "The hell I am! I'm not." But sure as heck, I found myself doing extractions, and I've helped people that were possessed before, and I have no clue how I've been called to it, but it feels very right. And um yeah, I found an interest in it as a child, even though I tried to ignore my psychic abilities. When we first moved into my parents' house, I was like 4 or 5. I would see shadow figures, I would see people there. Um but my dad would tell me it wasn't real, so I just tried to chalk it up to nothing. Really, my imagination. They had me tested to make sure I wasn't mentally insane, quite literally.
Well, that's understandable that they would wonder that. They had no other
Yes.
criteria to go on, like what's different about our child.
Right, right. So I would see these paranormal shows. I saw Ed and Lorraine. I saw Katrina Weidman and Nick Groff, and I just delved myself in at 14 years old. And by the time I became a psychic medium, I had a binder full of notes on demonology, and I'm like, oh, That is so odd. And and I realized I had all these notes by the time my first mentor was telling me I was meant to do these things too. So it's funny how it all brought it together. Yeah.
So what is your definition of demonology? And is it the same as what Carl always says his is?
What's funny is I'm not sure if I've heard what Carl's definition is, but mine, I like to study the origin of demonic entities. I like to study mainly their phenomena and how they affect people. And usually it's funny how they're linked to trauma.
Yes.
And so I found that they go for the unhealed, and I was once unhealed. So I feel like it all comes full circle. So my studying of demonology is really the phenomena and how they attack family members, and what the activity looks like and what it cannot look like, how they can go dormant, right. How it can, all different phases of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the definition I employ is demonology is the systematized study of the lore and cultural traditions of wicked spirits. So mine's a bit broader, but for me, there is applied demonology and academic demonology, and academic studies demonology and the demonic lore, the names, the origins, whereas applied demonology actually addresses situations, as do you. People come and consult. You can do that over the internet. You can do that through email, or you can talk to people on the phone. You can actually go and see them sometimes, which you do if you have expelled spirits.
Now, wouldn't that be religious demonology if you're actually expelling them?
Yes, that's what. I had mentioned to you that my brother could call him a religious demonologist, whereas I'm more of a secular demonologist. And right. I mean, you're just you. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I study all different cultures too. And I never really have a broad term on it. I kind of just leave it so open as to the activity and the in between, because I've seen very, very minor demonic entities, or ones that are of a lower ranking, that don't do as much harm and aren't there to necessarily possess and kill you, but just to feed off you. And then I've seen them literally try to possess you and want you dead. So I've seen it so many different broad, all over the spectrum with it. So I guess I really haven't found an exact term to my demonology, except that it's phenomena, and however it affects a human being is what I've studied the most. And
I think your definition will grow as you go along and adapt.
Yeah. Definitely so.
Yeah, let's field the question. Well, with these glasses I can. Here's a question that came in, Alex. Do you feel as if you are more prone to certain types of negative phenomena due to being a woman? Very good question.
Maybe so. I wouldn't say that. I would truly say I feel like it depends on consciousness level and how much you've experienced and opened yourself to actually see what is considered activity. And sometimes things are happening and you're like, oh, I didn't know that was paranormal even. You know what I mean? So I don't know if that really makes sense, but
yeah. Well, thank you for your question, Sarah. Yeah, that is true. I mean, women are thought of as being more vulnerable, more sensitive, more receptive, let's say, and perhaps that applies.
I would say with emotions, yeah, because I know sometimes, I mean, if a woman is seen as more emotional or something, or they get rattled more easily, but that could be anybody, depending on your tolerance for this stuff, I believe. But then that can sometimes make you a target or make you more prone to experiencing things, I'd say. But
do you find as a demonologist you are able to summon a certain level of authority? I have found that, and it seems to be not even myself. Probably it comes from within me, but there have been in situations where I don't know why they're putting confidence in me. I really don't want to be here. And suddenly something else comes out and I'm able to say, stop, or a key word, or back. And the person who's oppressed or possessed responds. So you find that?
I haven't found that with the possessed quite yet. I actually only had one go under possession while during the extraction, where they actually lost complete control. But I've found that when I walk into a location that has a demonic entity or even a negative entity, they do try to act dormant or hide. And when I don't know, I get a certain energy about me where I stand my ground, and it's not a word, but it's an energy, and I have to be in the right mindset for it. But yeah, it's weird. It comes over me. I don't always have to ask for it, type of thing. Yeah.
Do we want to ask something about her psychic propensities? I don't know how much, if you are in total control of your psychic abilities, because psychics I've talked to, they tend to be assaulted by this ability, and they learn filtration after a time, but it's always like knocking on their door, and like, let me talk through you. Let me say something. Impressions, information come through.
Yeah, a lot of times they can be very intrusive, especially when you open that door going to an active location. Though I have found with like trial and error, it's like boundaries. As long as you, and I think there's a certain level of universal authority that negative entities can't go past, but many don't know. If you say, your word is so powerful. If you say you cannot touch me, you don't have permission. And if you're stern in that, it's a boundary. If you can't be manipulated by people easily, I don't feel you'll be manipulated by a spirit easily. So as long as you're stern and you're grounded and solid within who you are, you know what I mean? But yeah.
So can you teach the people who claim to be under some sort of influence or possession to be that confident in themselves and in their belief that they have power over anything that's negative for them to help themselves?
You definitely can. But I will say you can lead a horse to water, but can't make it drink. They have to do the inner work and have to meet at 50-50. I can give all the knowledge, and I absolutely do try to help people. And I mean, being a psychic medium, I definitely had to go through trial and error and learn how to get that under control too, because that does make you very susceptible to these things. If they know that you can see them, they're angry. You could go and tell people you've seen them. They're not shape-shifting to you. If you've seen their true form, they're going to get very angry.
But they can only be seen by people who believe that they exist.
To an extent, yes, I believe. But then I've also, for example, I can't talk too much about it because we're still filming, but there's a specific case in Olcott right now where she couldn't live in her house. It ended up being turned into a paranormal location. And 3 men that don't believe in the paranormal, don't believe in anything, recently rented it out. They had a job to do in Olcott. They said they were only going to be there for 2 months. One of the 3 couldn't last more than a week. He said the job wasn't worth it. They were like, what, is blood going to drip from the walls? And there is now indeed a very weird colored substance dripping from the walls.
And what else did they have going on that scared them away?
They had oh my gosh, they were seeing figures. They were hearing things. They were being woken up by something tugging their arm. Always around 3 a.m., always in the late hours. At one point, the one man's bedstand was shaking so fiercely that it almost started to levitate. You know how levitations, they kind of go with that shaking motion to the point where they're rattling. That happened 2 different times where he couldn't sleep, and he ended up calling my client, who is now the owner of this place. And he's like, what part of this house isn't haunted? And he didn't believe in demons, but they haven't admitted to this, but we did hear over the cameras that they thought they saw a nun or some kind of entity coming out of the closet, which some of the history of this land, actually, it makes sense with, because one of the churches next door was built in 1844. So very, very intriguing. And she's on lands of the War of 1812. So I don't necessarily believe that people can't see a demon if they don't believe in it, but it's almost like if you challenge it, it's like, I don't believe in them. They're not real. They couldn't do it. And then it's like, well, depending on what territory you're
on. Level of belief if they'll actually sit there and challenge, because you're not going to challenge something you don't believe exists. So that's almost, the same as, a true believer versus a pseudo skeptic. That this could never, ever happen. Yeah. You're giving it some kind of credibility that it could happen by even mentioning it.
Yeah.
For instance, the subjectivity of it. I'm not afraid of haunted dolls. I'd love to see a doll turn its head and blink an eye. In fact, when Elise is employed by an antique shop, and when somebody could bring in a doll, or when she's in a shop and they have a doll, I hear her talking, and I say, what is she saying? She said, if you blink at me, I'll take you home. If you blink, you open one, you move, I'll take you home with me.
Nobody blinks.
Not yet.
Yeah, I will say we've had some haunted objects donated to us. One of them has been said to move. We haven't seen it move. We've gotten activity off of it, but we have not seen its head move or anything like that.
Well,
so do you have your haunted objects like under like special glass or something where they're not going to bother people?
So I'm working on getting plexiglass, but I basically, as of right now, have them in the background. Actually, it is blessed with holy water that is actually blessed by a priest that has done exorcisms.
next time you say that, I have to have that.
And I also speak light language. So I wrote prayers with, I did black paint, and I actually ground up some selenite and mixed that in and did prayers all along all four sides.
Cool. I commend that. That's interesting.
And it definitely like calmed the activity down. And obviously we don't irritate them or anything. I don't necessarily.
No, I wouldn't go out on a limb to irritate them either. Like for instance, if I was in a haunted museum, even if it was the formidable Annabelle, if somebody was being a real jerk and somehow opened the case foolishly and tossed Annabelle, the Annabelle Raggedy Ann doll, I'd say, don't be such an idiot. And I'd put it back. I wouldn't.
Right.
I wouldn't.
Well, yeah,
be sure. I wouldn't be sure. I wouldn't be. That would be very disrespectful anyway, because a lot of people do believe that. However, if somebody went further and I went back to my car and I opened my backpack and I saw Annabelle in there, I think I'd want some blessing over me at that point.
Oh, absolutely.
I have my levels, my limits. What was that last comment? Question?
I think that was actually one of my clients that come in.
Hey guys, showing support for Alex. She is amazing. Love listening to you guys.
So much love. Thank you, Chica.
Yeah. So you seem to have something of a following. People know of you and your work.
It's funny because in high school, I started to realize I was a psychic medium, and that's kind of how I got the following. I just kind of tapped into that after my papa had passed away, because I started being able to realize I can do some things I shouldn't be able to do. And the one day a girl walked past me in high school, and I started picking up on her grandfather that passed away a couple years back. And I described him to a T, and she started crying, pulling up pictures. And next thing you know, I was doing readings for the teachers. The students at the end of the classes, the teachers were reserving 5 minutes at the end of class for me. And it just went around.
Yeah, my experience in high school and junior high was a little different from that, because mine was like a generation almost before yours. And so it wasn't so well accepted. That was before Ghost Hunters, in which I was cast in that series. And it was before that was popular. And, I was the ghost guy, the ghost freak. So.
Yeah, I definitely had some of that, especially around the city here. Some people are definitely freaked out by what I do.
I grew up in a little town in western Rhode Island. It was like the Andy Griffith Show, Mayberry RFD, but without the laugh track. And I can remember when I was known for paranormal investigating, because I stupidly brought my books into school for show and tell and to reading. I used to see blinds closing when I walked down Main Street. There was like the ghost guy there. But
oh my goodness.
20 years later, it was not, such a social pariah to be like that.
Right. Oh my gosh.
That
has been rough though.
I have so many questions. I mean, but you can just tell your story. You also do art, and that's what I really wanted to get at before we run out of time. What do you got? What pictures do you have?
I've actually, every demonic entity that I've ever seen or something that looks new to me, I paint it, especially when I can't get out of my head. I've woken up actually saying prayers of exorcism that I didn't even know when I was being attacked during my sleep.
I just saw Alex is top notch.
That's Shane.
You gotta be, yeah. Well, I'm not sure who it was. I just saw Alex is top notch, and a handsome guy with glasses. Yeah. So you see these demons, and not everybody's able to. As I showed you, I was able to capture pictures twice.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal
knowledge. I don't know what else to call them. because that opens up a whole, a whole conversation when you say it's demonic. But
I could
don't.
absolutely say, even from being a psychic medium, the picture you showed me,
Yes.
you definitely have.
Well, in that context, what we were doing when the pictures were taken, I have to believe it's demonic because the family was driven out of their house that night, and eventually they stayed out. They didn't come back. And the other one, I haven't sent it to you yet. That's the greenish one. I don't think I sent that to you. You have to lighten it to see the detail. But a young woman was going under a state of transient possession, and most of the pictures of her were normal. That one, when she was going under, it looks like a desiccated corpse. The lighting is just strange. Yeah, maybe it's an effect of the lighting, but the other pictures taken consecutively before, they weren't like that.
Oh, I know what you mean. Yeah, you just catch that glimpse on the camera, and the face is completely distorted.
After that, hers was really distorted. I cannot explain it. So, what you got to show us, please?
Oh, I'd love to. So I'm gonna start off with the entity in my parents' house that I had seen. It tried to hide its. It tried to hide its what it looked like to me multiple times. It did not want me to know.
You're the one who can see them, so it would shy away from you.
Now, originally, yeah, it looked like this, and this wasn't really. Now, when I finally had gotten, when I was able to really channel and see it, I got a lot more detail. But it would change forms. I would see horns, and then other times I wouldn't. But I just remember these glowing eyes, and that's my symbol that it is a demonic entity. If its eyes are glowing, that's my sign.
That's a good indication. Yeah, those are unwholesome images. They're
Yes.
loaded with They're loaded with personality.
Yes, they are. Yeah, not everyone likes to see them, so I kind of keep them kept away. But there was even the entity we saw at the Conjuring House when we did visit. I didn't know I was face to face with it at the time. I was on a TikTok live. I had me and Shane went upstairs to change out batteries with cameras. And you know that middle part in between the bedrooms?
Precisely. I had an experience there. Yeah.
Me too. It swung the door right into my arm, so I moved Shane out of the way. I was like, okay, you gotta get out of here. And we turned around quick, and the door was swaying. And when I went to turn my camera around, this big shadow figure popped out. And I sensed it there, but I couldn't physically see it until I checked.
Yeah. When that shadow figure came out, I have to ask you, was it in human form, or was it just a kind of suggesting human form and basically a blob?
It was a cloaked figure, believe it or not. But when I lightened the image and looked at it, I was able to channel the face. And we actually, it's too bad. I should have sent the image over, the lightened image, but this is actually what it looked like.
That definitely is impactful. Oh, there's missing an eye. It looks like it has a scar where an eye would be.
Yeah.
Basically inhuman.
Yeah, it was insane, and the energy up there was insane too. I knew I could not be up there alone. Actually, I was extremely sick at the Conjuring House. Usually I'm the last one to be attacked, and I was the first one to be attacked there.
Yeah. Do you have a question?
No, I'm just listening
I've been
to you guys.
dominating because when you said that middle room, I had an early experience there. They'd never seen it before. We were called in. I think I touched on that with you. That you called in about that to address the haunting in the Conjuring House, and we were the first investigating team before the Warren. And in that section you're describing, that's where I saw that darkness, that black, almost a figure, kind of conical, but basically amorphous. It was coming at me. It was so palpable. I thought there was a fire in the house. I thought I was going to smell smoke. It's a backdraft.
Yeah, and that's
came at me, and then it was gone.
And that's what happened actually. After Jen and Corey had walked us through, we were coming out of the library, and I was on a live showing people, our followers around. And it was still daylight out. Walking into the kitchen, you're right next to that window. You're getting light in. We didn't even have to have the lights on. And all of a sudden, in my live, and if I'm looking around, I saw like a black mass or smoke go over my head only. And I'm like, and I looked into my live, like if I could look into this right now, and I couldn't see my face, but I could see the window lit up and lighting the room up behind me. So.
Right. And then that was way back when I experienced it. I'm talking about August 1973. And 40 years later, Corey and Jen's son, Kyler, he saw that and he didn't know my story. What he described is just the same. He didn't go back there for a while. He wouldn't sleep there. We have another question, Sarah. With your research into origins of the demonic, what theories and cultures do you find to be either true, when you go into the field? Out there.
I do find that with different cultures, a lot of times there are the same demonic entities, but called something different. Just call it something different, but keep up with the same activity, this, that. So out of respect, you obviously call that entity whatever within that culture with whatever residential case you have. But I find that there's still the same activity. And I think that's what you have to study. And you have to keep journals because it almost, it's like almost a daily journal. You end up finding patterns with activity. So I think that stays true with demonology in any cultural case or anything, because you can get the same activity even if it's called something different.
There are parallel names in culture, to begin as a cathonicist, somebody who studied these things, like Astarte and Hecate are somewhat parallel. They're counterparts, but they're different cultures. But they have the same descriptions of what their propensities are, how they're supposed to appear, what they look like. So you do find those parallels. So what does the pragmatist say about this? About you don't take demons literally?
No, I do not. Have you had any cases that you were called to that you've gone in and found out that there was a normal explanation, that there weren't any demons hovering over people, and that either it was a psychiatric problem or maybe they were just having bad time with electrical EMF overruns in their house because it's old wiring and it was giving them the headaches and the depression?
Unfortunately, yes, there was a case. I had gone to the woman's mother's house to do a cleansing of the energy that her daughter had left over, and I ended up getting a call from the daughter, and she was making all these claims and everything, and she told me she had specific witnesses and pictures. The pictures weren't anything. Her witnesses actually didn't line up, and they actually checking out. Sadly, I do sometimes look into the medical side of things because you have to make sure that their medicine isn't going to cause symptoms that.
We've got a list of 100 questions we ask before we'll even go out and do an investigation.
Exactly. And unfortunately, I wouldn't even go to this woman's house because I ended up having to tell her, okay, unfortunately, ma'am, you are, on certain medications that can't really it can't really prove that this.
They distort the results and negate results,
And on top of that, she was pregnant too. And it was just.
Yeah, at least it's fortunate in a sense. Yeah, it's disappointing for the client. Sometimes you want to give them something spectacular. That's what they want, but you have to be a realist too.
Yeah, you can't go out to a house that doesn't have the evidence, and you might be putting yourself in a bad situation at that point because
we went to one. I mean, luckily there were 3 of us there covering each other's back where
I know
we were checking out. The man left his medication on the counter, and he not only had seizure medication, he was diabetic, he had brain surgery, and then he's saying he sees shadows. Well, chances are that's a medical condition. We're not going to start looking for demons yet.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Unfortunately, he was someone who supposedly goes and searches for demons in other people's houses. So.
And he builds devices to. It's a long story. But so it's like, you put together the big picture, and there are always elements of a situation that we don't know. We don't know exactly what the person's experience is, but we have to evaluate.
Yeah, definitely.
Happening.
Now I've gotten lucky with cases. I'll say being psychic, I'll do consultations beforehand, and I will pick up. And if I feel or if I sense that there is any dishonesty or something, I don't take the case. But a lot of times I I get the paranormal calls and I sense something and I'm like, okay. And we've actually gotten some decent activity. Not all demonic, of course, but then there's been the couple cases that have been just.
Well,
And-
Jenna Pulaski asks, oh, sorry to cut you off.
No, you're okay.
Jenna Pulaski asks, do you feel that religions are intertwined together? You know, do you think that
Maybe a little bit, but sadly, religion usually separates people because we can't be open enough to respect without believing another and actually hear each other out to get to a point where you hear the bottom line of everything, you hear the beliefs of their entities, you know what I mean? And I feel like then people could come together, but then, yeah, that can be a difficult subject, sadly, but I'm very open with everything in any religion because any client that does come to me, I want to be able to help them regardless.
well, I think you've learned to be adaptable, and that's a comfort to people. You're not exclusive. There are certain schools of thought where only, for instance, and this is just one example, only a Roman Catholic belief system can be effective against evil spirits. You know, and in which case they shouldn't be oppressed by them anyway. Their faith is that strong, but sometimes it does happen. And they believe only through the Roman Catholic ritual of exorcism, the rite of exorcism, can they be rid of the demon. Yeah, sometimes it would work, sometimes it would not, because it is in part a psychodrama. Other people feel that sincerity counts. If you are standing up to these evil spirits and saying, you have no license to be here, you must leave, and you say it with authority, and you're pure in your intent, then that should be effective too.
Yeah, it's really a mind. I agree. Yeah, I feel like it's almost everything all in one, a mind, body, and soul thing, It's the whole battle, mind, body, and soul. You need some kind of prayer or some kind of, whether it's shamanism or some kind of energy work, somebody talking to the person to keep them there and talk to that person, not the entity. It's mind, body, and soul. Yeah.
So I take it you are sometimes the first one to sense. It can be called discernment, where you know if it's a human or a non-human spirit.
Yes.
Is how it's generally categorized, but you can sense that you have and it would be borne out by experience and evidence later, but you probably get an initial impression.
Yeah, I will usually get impressions, and I'll keep it in the back of my head because with doing the paranormal side of things, evidence has to back up. Even if I am very sure of myself when it comes to filming and when it comes to getting evidence to help make a conclusion for somebody, I always do back it up with evidence. But yeah, there are some signs. I will get very, very nauseous around a negative entity or dizzy. Or oddly enough, I'll sense like a really dark heaviness about that person. Or oddly enough, how they talk, or they'll say something that actually gives it away really easily.
Oh, that's fascinating. What about finding evidence in arrears, like say photographs? Some photographs have what we call noise. They have a lot of information on them, and we might not see something right away, but then we're analyzing it back at home and say, oh, look at this. Those are eyes. You see that form there? I don't even know if that was on the picture before.
Visual evidence?
Visual evidence or auditory. Let's say about auditory, because Elise had an experience like that where auditory evidence showed up that we did not expect at all later. And it was empiric. It was there. I don't know if you want to go into that.
You can go into that.
Or we can let's just show our episode. No, because actually that was the subject of one of our cases that was documented. And we had a client who was disturbed by voices. In fact, he had gone to the house in Harrisville, the Conjuring House. He was looking for a demonologist, and the person there recommended Carl. So he contacted me, and Elise and I went to his place, and we interviewed and we investigated. His real problem was it's a really intense story. He was a police officer, and he was shot at. The bullet just missed him during an altercation, and the bullet went right over his right ear, but enough to cost him his hearing. I think it was 85 to 90% of his hearing was gone out of that ear. And then he started to hear the voices talking to him. Now, given the the medical trauma and the fact that he had certain emotional trauma, unresolved conflicts in his past, I thought, and he had felt at one point that maybe he had displeased his father, who was also a police officer. And then when our client was injured, he had to leave the police force. He thought maybe he was a letdown, and he was hearing voices berating him, telling him, "You worthless Joe. Don't kill yourself. There's nothing. What do you stick around for, you son of a?" Now, I thought, I'm talking to Elise. I'm saying, well, obviously, this is his trauma speaking to him. It has become personified, and that's how his subconscious deals with it. It's projecting. He's giving it a personality, and it's beating up on him. So this is how he's purging. This is how he's dealing with it. I thought it's textbook psychologist. Then Elise, listening to the recording of our interview, not expecting to hear anything, and while she's listening, she tells me, "Carl, you've got to hear this. The voice is on the recording. Subtly, augmented, listen. And that voice that our client described is speaking. The voices he is hearing in his mind are on the recorder, or that voice is berating him, saying just what he said. There's our real ghost." How
That's incredible.
I mean, I cited, Elise and I cited parapsychological. Well, one parapsychological principle
could be
that
he
PK.
had a near-death experience.
Yep.
And had PK abilities after that. He was imprinting that voice on them.
That's what we thought. Yeah, that's one explanation. Poltergeist can be very subtle, but the fact is, it went from being a psychological aberration to something. Here it is. We can listen to it.
Well, oddly enough, as soon as you said he lost his hearing, when you're forced to turn off other senses, it can make you open up.
Hyper aware,
Mm-hmm.
more sensitive, receptive.
Absolutely. And near-death experience can absolutely, like you were saying, 100%.
Yeah. Well, what a relief it was to him. We did him some good. It wasn't that everything was tied up and lived happily ever after. No, but what a catharsis for him to hear that. If you could have been there to experience that, Alex, how he was suddenly, no, when you're not crazy, Joe, you're not, this is the voice.
Right.
We can talk about his origins. I have my ideas, Elise may have some, but it's real. It's there. You're not imagining it. So
yeah.
That was one of those rare moments we have in parapsychological investigation.
EVPs are some really great evidence to have, like truly. It's some of the best evidence sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Have you captured EVP, recorded some that are worth saving?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. We've actually gotten some from our dolls. We've gotten some at the Conjuring house. It was saying Shane's name left and right. Something was actually mocking our one partner's voice that came there with us and saying it was like magic whisper. It was like, you know what I mean? They were literally like taking and mocking
right.
someone else. It was wild. I'm trying to think. The one time actually close to here, we were investigating a locally haunted road called Delaware Road. And I was picking up on this entity and I was like, I just heard this really guttural growl. And then all of a sudden we play back the EVP and we heard the guttural man's voice. And I'm like, yep, there it is.
Again, confirmation.
Yeah.
When you have something imprinted where you can, you have to know the person who's recording it, but in this case you did it because it was you. You kind of have to know, but that's confirmation. And we have Dead Air Full Spectrum asked, do you engage in any form of protection ritual or mindset before entering a potential negative situation? So do you prepare yourself?
Absolutely. I alone, from what I do, I cleanse on almost a daily basis. I do meditation every morning. I talk to my ancestors, anything from like smudging and cleansing with herbs to waters to obviously even holy water, blessed holy water. I'll make my own herbal mix-ups, really. Yeah, I do a lot, truthfully. I even make protective boards that I hang up in my home. I face mirrors facing the outside of my home. I do the whole 9 yards, but when it comes to entering a haunted location, there are times where if I know it's going to be really bad, I I try to stay away from junk food days prior to. I try to actually get myself physically well
I wish I was
equipped.
as pure as you. I shave every morning. I never skip a day, but
I might not look the part every time, but I'll feel the part, you know.
Right. Yeah. Someone else asked, actually, Ajang Sardi from Indonesia. She asked, is there a distinction between the, can you tell? Yeah, let me get her exact words. Ajang asked, there is a distinction between the demon speaking or his physical trauma. You know, thank you. Yeah, every time you say demon, she sprays me with her blessed rose water. I put on cologne for you, Alex. I don't know if you can tell, but I do. Anyway, she wants to know if there's a distinction between the demon speaking or his physical trauma. You know, where do you? I don't know if it's hard to tell at first. I think sometimes it could be confusing. Is that the person's trauma, their upset, their division, their emotional scarring, or the demon speaking? Are there times where you get confused, as at least initially, as to which one is speaking?
There absolutely can be, because the thing is, with a demonic entity, with a negative entity even, and lower going into demonic entities, they are very manipulative and they will try to go dormant. So a lot of times then they'll hide behind a mental illness, no problem. But you also have to know the difference between signs of mental illness and, I mean, you know what I mean. And then they're, you know, if they're, hopefully they're not having brain surgeries, because that can actually trigger somebody speaking a different language. And then you have to be aware of people that have had medical histories on top of that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you say something earlier about light language?
Light language, yes.
Yeah. Angelic, or a lightning language that comes from a spiritual source. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So it's funny. I had a few different mentors over the years that I've been doing this, and one of them I'm not in contact with anymore. But she taught me about this light language, and she would speak it, and I'm like, what is that you're speaking? And she's like, you know what it is. You spoke it as a kid, and it like triggered a memory where I would just babble, but it wasn't just babble. I was saying things that I knew what they meant, but it ends up being a mix of different languages, I believe, from a span of your different lifetimes that you could have lived. And I mean, it can go back from really far to newer, but it ends up being something that not somebody can identify, but your soul can hear. So it's only something that your soul will understand. So typically a lot of healers or people that practice and dabble with shamanistic rituals and stuff like that will learn their light language to do healings and whatnot. So yeah, it's not a specific language of this or that, but it's something that your energy reads. So when somebody speaks it, you feel something off of it, even if you don't understand it, and you likely get the idea of what it meant.
So you'd have to be a psychic to be able to understand it and to speak it?
Not psychic necessarily. It's kind of something that anybody could really tap into. It's really your soul. It's almost like specific to your thumbprint. Your light language, your soul's DNA, your soul's language is specific to you. So only you would be able to understand it. But if you're hearing it, even though you don't understand it, you likely feel if it's almost like, you know how like if you're at a grocery store and you hear like Spanish people talking, you can kind of tell if they're saying something negative or not.
You're gonna get
Yeah, you can feel that vibration.
By the tone, you know. And just the idioms of language and the mode of language. If people talk certain ways, you know, they're going to sound like that. Even they might think you understand what they're saying, but you're getting the tone.
Yes.
Oh, I don't know. I was I was employed with an art emporium for quite some time, and we had a couple of students from Rhode Island School of Design, and she just happened to say, she said something in Korean, and I said, it's 3:15. And you speak Korean? You knew I was saying, what time is it? I said, no, I really don't. Her tone, like, you know, and she glanced over at the clock. So I figured, you know, she wanted to know the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of how it is with light language.
Yeah. But if you get that from people's tone, but that light language is fascinating because it sounds like it comes from a different part of the brain, or perhaps the spirit, or perhaps those are the same thing.
Yeah, yeah, you kind of just channel it. There's no rhyme or reason. Sometimes different noises will come out. Some people just sing. Sometimes it'll come out in singing. You kind of just you kind of like lose yourself in it. It's kind of like but you feel very, very grounded and very I don't know how to say it, but very lightened.
Vibration,
Like
certain frequencies, like almost like a yogic chanting, or
not necessarily chanting, but it's very flowy sounding. It can be. Of course, it can sound angry. I've definitely gone into places where I'm doing a cleansing and something won't leave, and I go in there saying some angry stuff and be like, "Get out!" Like, But
I don't know if you're not old enough to remember the cartoon, the Hanna-Barbera cartoon, the Flintstones.
Well, oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, well, they're still a broadcast, and Fred Flintstone, when he was upset at something or he stubbed his toe, he would say like a ratastatic, so kind of like that. That was his maybe dark language,
right?
Be cussing,
exactly. He was doing something.
Can you distinguish this from speaking in tongues? Is that something different? It can be equated.
No, I
experience of speaking in tongues.
So with speaking in tongues, I feel like that's usually, it almost sounds like more like Hebrew, or the tongues that I've seen is usually, it can even be somebody like speaking what they would usually say just backwards even. So I have found that, and usually something else is going on along with speaking in tongues or a different language coming through where that's negative or something. There's usually other symptoms going on with that, whether it's them losing control of their physical body or remembering it and knowing what they're doing but not having control.
Right.
Because with light language, you're not losing control, but it's kind of like meditation where you're in a zen more so. Whereas with tongues, you're not in a zen. It feels like something's controlling you, like a puppet.
Precisely, yeah. It's like being taken over. Yes. And I know you equate it to like can sound Hebraic. I have a friend, a colleague, Father Ed Broderick. He is the best tongue speaker I've ever heard.
Wow, really?
I've heard it at Pentecostal services. I have heard that frequently. For a while, I used to hear that. But to hear Father Ed speak that, it seems to have a cadence and a syntax and almost a declension. It sounds, like a cogent language, but it's not. It's just speaking in tongues. But I find it so soothing when he speaks in tongues. I just have to make sure I don't nod off and go to sleep because it's just something him speaking that. And sometimes he'll laugh while he's saying it, and it's remarkable what he does. Whether it is a religious manifestation, a thing with the brain, or a light talk, I don't know. I just know it sounds good.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Father Ed and have him do a little. No, you can't really do a command performance though. But
Oh, the light language.
Well, I was talking about speaking in tongues, but the light language. Can you do that when you wish? When it's appropriate?
I can. It kind of has to flow easily, or I have to feel that it's the right timing, kind of. It's almost like when I'm channeling, like when I start to tap in or something, if it's meant to come out, it comes out type of thing.
Mm-hmm. We have a question from Sarah Yosef. Have you experienced with time slips? Have you had experiences with time slips or portals when you were at the Conjuring House? Because that's supposed to be characteristic of the Conjuring House. We have some kind of time distortion, they call it slippage, or a portal to another dimension.
Yeah, I believe we did. There were times where we could have sworn that it had only been a few minutes and it was longer, or we thought it was hours and it had only been a few minutes. There was even a time where I was looking out the window and I saw a woman, I don't know what kind of gown this was. It was maybe some sort of nightgown, but a woman with dark hair that had it all pinned up. It looked like she walked behind the bushes and I just didn't see her after that.
She seemed that solid. You wondered, is there a person out there?
Yes, and I don't always see spirit in person like that because I'll tap into different clair abilities depending on whatever spirit, however they choose to communicate with me, because I have different symbol bases that they can kind of work with.
I went into that house once. They have a mirror that's been there for, it was there when in the 1970s when the parents had stewardship of that house. I looked in that mirror, and to my surprise, I thought I was looking at my brother. I was looking, the reflection was moving with me, and I was looking at my brother Keith. It's like Keith is here. I'm seeing him, but it's my reflection. And it was a bizarre experience.
Was it in the bathroom?
No, this was out in the living room. The living room now, the parlor. It used to be the kitchen when the parents had it. You're not getting my joke. He's my twin brother.
Oh, because I was gonna say, actually, we had I thought it was a joke, but I felt weird in the mirror in the bathroom.
No, I didn't see my brother in the bathroom. No, I did actually have a time distortion where it was when Jen and Corey had a closing on the house, and they invited me over, and I brought Elise, of course, and this was 4 years ago. And I looked at that mirror and I said, by gum, that's the same mirror that was hanging there. The parents had it, Norma Sutcliffe, a couple of successive owners. And I looked in that mirror, not expecting anything, but, I haven't looked in this mirror in a long time. I saw myself as I looked when I was 18. And this was so vivid. I said, Elise, Corey, when they get in here, I'm sure it'll stop. And all I could do was for about 3.5 minutes, I looked at that reflection. And I had shoulder length strawberry blonde. I've told the story so many. I wasn't even going to go into it, but now
the mirror of Erised.
Yeah. Is that Harry Potter? I like that. No, but I was like, it really was. I was there. It wasn't just the light or anything. And I told myself, I can't take a picture of it. I don't. I don't think the phone would do anything anyway. But I'm just going to memorize this, and no, I didn't hallucinate. It's not the sunlight, because I've looked at my reflection in that same lighting condition. I moved. I still had my modern red polo shirt on, but I had the long hair, sideburns. Like the 1970s, all the guys, and some of the girls had sideburns back then. That was our style. But I just looked, better, like young. I was 18 again instead of my aged, and it's like this is freaking me out. I mean, it's not like a home movie. I am looking at myself.
And oddly enough, that's kind of like what I was feeling in the bathroom.
Yeah,
with the mirror.
Through it again.
I felt I was like, I almost had this. I don't know if it was the overwhelming fear, or I don't know if it was that I was getting attacked. But there were times where I was like, I feel like I look old. Like,
you are the opposite.
Yes.
You crinkled.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt like you could see the bags under my. I was like, I feel like this house is taking a toll on me tonight. I was like, oh my God. I actually was so scared. I dragged Shane in the bathroom with me.
Oh wow.
And our friends were scared to go to the bathroom alone. Nobody was.
Well, you can be like that in that house. You can be a little trepidatious about going to the bathroom by yourself. I mean, if I aged into my 70s or 80s or something, I'd be like. Hey, guys, help me out. Help me outside. Bring me into the light, please. Please. And your oxygen.
I stared into that mirror for a long time, and nothing happened. I tried. I thought it would be fun.
Well, you did the mirror a favor, I think.
Wow.
Staring into it that long. Yeah. But Mike Ricksecker, a journalist.
That was the day.
yeah, that was the day. We tried it because I told my story. It didn't happen that day, but it had happened. And Mike he said his features started to alter a little bit, got a little distorted, but then it didn't turn into anything. Then Matrix.
Interesting.
He saw some distortion. But and Carolyn Perrinhead, the lady of the house during that time, the 1970s, she certainly had time distortions. Where one time she came into that same room that I was describing, and seated at the table, or a table, were two men in antique clothing, vintage clothing. I mean, they were probably dressed like the early 1800s. I don't know, but they were in old-fashioned clothes. Those two men were aware of her, these what should be atmospheric or residual haunts. They looked at Carolyn with astonishment, like as if to say, who is this scantily clad lass, this slender lass? And she looked at them. So for those moments, perhaps Carolyn was the ghost to them by their perspectives. And she was the ghost to them, and they were the ghost to her, and then they were gone.
Right, like they were looking at her like, what is she doing here?
Yes.
That's
Okay, we have from Sarah. Do you have any advice or suggestions for people in keeping the darker energy at bay to minimize interaction with our reality? Like, can you keep them away? You observe them, maybe experience them to a degree, but stay safe from them.
You definitely can do a lot to try and keep it at bay. The One of the main things is keeping a good energy. If you're not a negative person, you're not likely going to attract something negative unless there are cracks in your auric field where you're violent. Are you using substance abuse? Are you dabbling in dark magic and things that would be inviting that? Is it law of attraction or invitation? If so long as you're keeping good energy in your home. Also, sounds weird, but I do believe that keeping your home clean or tidy to your extent, because I don't think negative entities really like change. So they like
Right.
they
Good
like
point.
a area where they know nothing's changing, and if it's messy and it's been that way for a while, they're gonna know it's a safe space for them at that point. So,
Mhm.
don't be afraid to move your furniture around every once in a while.
Well,
Um, you
when I
know,
look at the clock, it was no. If you wanted more to say more, we don't have to shut off right now. I was just a little feng shui there can go a long way. Yeah,
oh, it's totally up to you. Totally up to you
you
guys.
shouldn't say that because I'll keep you on for another 15 minutes or so. But
I know Elise is like, hold up.
let's take another couple of questions because you're just too good to let go of right now. So, what do we got here? Okay, Sarah again. Given your senses for interdimensional resonances, do yourself? Well, these aren't working as good as I
Would you
thought.
like me to read that for you?
I can read it, but I'd like you to read it. Yeah,
Given your senses for interdimensional resonances, do
That's what I got.
yourself being attractive to UFO phenomena? Do you find yourself being attractive to UFO phenomena?
yeah. That right at that space, that's where my vision goes. Right after that.
Believe it or not, I feel like I may have seen some things here and there when I was young, but I think Shane is way more into the UFO thing. It's not that I'm not open to it, and I believe that there are definitely other beings out there. I definitely do. But it's definitely not my area of expertise. But yeah, I might be freaked out if an alien came up to me. Maybe not a ghost though at this point, like if I had to
I like the way
choose.
she put interdimensional resonances, but it's not. That's a whole different ballgame. It's like what demons are to like spiritualism and spirituality. That's what UFOs are to exploring the paranormal. It's something different. It's,
Hmm.
it's it's its own thing, and spirits can harass and be persistent and console you, but they ain't going to abduct you. And it's
Right.
said that the alien entities will.
I
I
thought
don't.
I was abducted by aliens.
You thought you were abducted by aliens?
Oh,
What happened in college?
And how it used to happen all the time in college. I'd stop falling asleep. I'd hear a loud buzzing, and these things would be all around me. And at the time, I was a church goer. I'd say prayers, so I'd wake up the next morning, remind myself that I did wake up the last time it happened. And it went away after a while. Years later, married kids in a house, and I was reading a book, and I realized I had sleep paralysis. I had never heard of it.
Now, it's totally logical that you would assign that to perhaps aliens coming into your room, alien
I've
abduction
had
or
it
something.
since.
Yeah.
I
And doesn't it seem like that if you
And
can't
even-
explain it otherwise?
even knowing what sleep paralysis is, when it happens, you don't realize it is that. The last
Right.
time it happened, I started falling asleep, and I thought someone was in my room. I have my own room. And I thought I was being attacked, and I was using all my martial arts skills to get this person off me, because first I thought maybe it was somebody, some of the people living in my house, like, what are you doing in my room? Didn't answer me. I started to fight and do a little judo and try to get them off me, and I couldn't. And in my brain, I knew it wasn't real, but it still kept happening until I just kind of hypnotized myself back to sleep. And it's a real, now I understand why when people say that they think they're being attacked or abducted or this or that it really can be in your mind, and it really can appear so real.
It is a physiological process. It's a neural
Because then the
paralyzer.
next night when I started falling asleep again, I started hearing the noise. I got up and got out of bed and kind of walked around the house a little bit so I wouldn't fall into that deep set. that you're falling, I guess it's right into REM sleep. You're skipping a couple of steps that you should be
Right.
falling into first. So I made sure that, I fell asleep more slowly.
Well, I'm acquainted
It
with
can
it.
be a real thing,
a
but there weren't
few-
any
yeah.
aliens. I was kind of disappointed to learn that.
Well, that is when you are a pragmatist, as are you. You kind of have, and as Alex, you can't help but be a little disappointed when you explain it. But yeah, you're disappointed. I mean, you get scared, but then it's like, oh nuts, I can explain it away. You do want some.
I
little
think,
spooky stuff.
yeah, but I feel like anything in this field or related to, it's like you'll get a little bit scared, but it's like, I'm glad I caught that. When you actually get that evidence, or if you don't get it, it's like, oh, that was scary, but I kind of wish I had that on camera.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you do. And there have been times where people do capture things on. It hasn't been my videos, but some people do have video of what could be alien presences entering their rooms. So you don't know. If I experienced it regularly, I would start to wonder. I would assign that to the neural paralyzer. But if other things happen and I started to feel maybe there is a presence, because that's also endemic to it, that people feel there's a presence in the room, and that's a psychological experience, a physiological experience of the brain, feeling a presence in your room. Peringer helmet that would incite that feeling of having a presence in the room that people would feel was God in the room or something. Yeah, we just heard our paranormal creak on the stairs.
Yeah, I was gonna say, ooh.
Oh, you heard that? Yeah, you can hear that when you're a guest because.
Yeah.
Well, Elise explained that when I was starting to get excited about it. What did you say that was?
The building is old wood. It's built like a barn. It's a historical museum that we use as our studio. And when people who weigh more than me come up the stairs and they do so slowly, it pushes each wooden stair down. And depending on weather conditions, after a while, they'll pop up a little bit, but they'll do it in order coming up the stairs. Sounds like somebody's coming up the
stairs. So it wouldn't work with
right.
every grain of wood, but the grain of wood, that's used for that, especially under certain atmospheric conditions when it gets damp, they will expand but they won't pop right back up. They're of that density where they'll stay somewhat down. It's very subtle, but then
I could nail them down, but
yeah, and it's not going to come up like a sponge. But then it will, after a while, it will come up suddenly. Pat, and you have bump, 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 bump up the stairs. And so I was all expecting to record something grand before.
Were you hoping to have a ghost there?
Always hoping. Well, not to the point of being subjective about it.
Like I said, it's a history museum. We have a lot of old objects, a lot of personal objects, and most of these things belong to people who died. So we're kind of hoping for something. But
yeah,
I was gonna say, I feel like you actually could probably capture something in the room you're in. For sure.
Well, there was a voice here once. Was
it a male by any chance?
Yes.
That's what I actually sense a male.
Heard it. It wasn't an articulated word.
It was just a noise.
It was a noise, but it sounded vocal. That's even Jim, who's very practical, an ex-police officer, retired police officer. He said that sounded like a voice, and it couldn't sound like anything else. But there's a building on the property that is pretty much confirmed it's haunted. It hasn't happened recently that we know of, but 3 different witnesses who didn't know each other's testimonies described the same man with a top hat.
Interesting.
Yeah. Here, I don't know. I'd like to think so. Elise and I have conducted some experiments.
I speak to them just in case when I'm trying, if it's old photographs or something, I'm like, if there's somebody here and you know who this is, just drop me a name and I can go home.
And among Elise's many skills, she is also a cemetery conservator. And with our crew, the Johnson Historical Society has a cemetery committee, and we go out and restore stones and basically police up cemeteries. We do the dirty work that a lot of people won't. We're totally volunteer. But at least speaks to the names sometimes. I
don't get any answers, but it's just polite. It's their space.
You do.
We go in, we make a lot of noise, and we leave. So
but you say we don't mean to disturb you. It's nice to keep on a good vibe with the spirits.
Yeah.
Whether they speak back or not.
Right. It's interesting that I definitely do sense a male present over there.
Yeah.
So I feel like you guys might get an EVP or something eventually of a male.
Are you sure you're not sensing me?
Oh, I'm positive.
I did put on cologne for you, so.
God.
All right.
It wasn't Old Spice, was it, Carl?
No, I didn't. Actually, if you picked up on it, it's actually called Bergeron, and I don't think it's manufactured
French?
anymore. Like most of my colognes, it goes back some years. Yeah, it might be Bergeron. You know, it is. I mean, I feel like
Canadian.
I left it in the car. Otherwise, I'd come up. Oh no, come on! Can you tell?
Right.
Yeah, if you come to Rhode Island, you'll experience Bergeron. Oh, I was kidding about it being me. So, but you really do sense the masculine presence here. You know, that's
Maybe we'll
apart
come
from.
across and maybe we'll pick up a voice in the show.
Yeah,
that'd be
I
wonderful.
truly actually sense I don't know what it is back there actually near your back shelf. I'm actually seeing a guy kind of with a beer gut actually.
Yeah, you don't have me. No, it's not me. No. Really? That's
a lot of
interesting.
people we know
Like I
here.
said, historic literature and artifacts and property deeds, titles, some from the mid 18th century are in these files. So, I mean, it looks like we have our Panoramic Paranormal headquarters. We pretty much do, but this is the Johnston Historical Society. So there are, vintage documents here and artifacts downstairs from many different sources, but all related to Johnston, Rhode Island. So I wonder if you are picking up on someone, not somebody.
Yeah. Yeah, interestingly enough, yeah. I feel like you guys could probably get something there.
Well, we should start experimenting again. We have here. Well, we should call it a night. Like I said, you give me the invitation. I did keep you on longer because you are a superb guest. You're just a very interesting and wonderful person to talk to. We thank you for coming on our show. I hope it's been as good for you.
Oh, it has. I really appreciated the conversation.
Yeah. And you knew who I was. You know what I do. Yeah. Well, thank you. I always say this to our guests that we should have you on again, and we intend to have most or all of our guests on again. We can make time, but we certainly want you. If we record any masculine tone voice here or have a sighting,
yes,
you'll be on that. You'll be on that much sooner again.
Anybody watching wants to help us review this tape, please do so when it's posted on YouTube.
I want to ask you one more question, and it can depend on circumstances and the participants. What do you think of seances? Very general, but what do you think of seances? Good, bad, ill-advised? Depends on the people.
I think it just depends on intention. I think everything is based on intention. If you go into it, holding hands, lighting candles, and saying, we only want spirits of light, we only want spirit, as long as you set the intention, because if you don't set the tone, really, you're calling out to anybody and everybody.
Yeah, let the bear come in. Open the door. I mean, if you just want, that might work if you just want results. Every time we say demon, she sprays me. Holy water, holy water. That smells so sweet. This is dominating the Bergeron. I don't smell manly anymore.
Smell like roses.
I probably should have dumped a little in my water or something.
Well, that's a sign of the, in the Catholic tradition, that's a sign of the miraculous is the scent of roses. But it can also be, something demonic. It's hard to tell, but that's generally something spiritual. Okay, well, thank you so much.
Nice meeting you. Nice talking to you, Alex.
Remember our little post-interview instruction about shutting off the leave studio exit.
Only have to.
Oh yeah, I have to click it
after we become ghosts.
Yeah, it's not going to be effective if you do it before. You have to in the afterlife. You have to do that. The after show.
Thank you to everybody who was watching.
Yes,
and writing
the
in
great questions. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Ajung. Thank everybody who wrote and watched and all that. And
And thank you to Ken for running the show.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it.
We didn't know if we'd have Ken, but we did have Ken.
I think that was our final good night.
Yeah, before we start another one. Good night, Alex. Good night, everybody.
Good night, y'all.